hopefully enjoyed the lunch. This afternoon, we're going to have several panels. The first one is brought to us, one of our sponsors, is Genective, and Linda Jing is the CEO of Genective. So she unfortunately has come down with COVID, not a bad case, but she's at home, and she'll be joining us by Zoom. And so Linda's going to cover a panel on seeds and crop protection. But Linda has a really interesting bio before we throw her up here. She grew up in a village in central China, and one of her first jobs was pulling weeds in the field, and she said, "I'm never going back into agriculture." But she started her career in Shanghai with PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant, but then came here to the U.S. and went to my alma mater and also graduated from Kellogg's Graduate School of Business. So we share that distinction between Linda and myself. She joined Monsanto and became part of Bayer. In 2009, she joined Monsanto, but then was hired by Genective in 2019 to lead their efforts with a joint venture between Lima Grain and KWS. So hopefully Linda is coming online with us by Zoom. There she is, Linda. Welcome. Good to see you. I'm going to turn it over to you to do introductions, Linda. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the nice intro. That was not expected. I thought, Jim, you told me my unique challenge is to keep everyone awake from just having lunch in the room or being remote. But I was also told I can do that because I am going to be everywhere for everyone. Only I myself cannot see that. Is that true?
Yes.
Wonderful. Although I cannot be there with you in person, but I am as serious and as excited as everyone in the room about our panel for multiple reasons. Number one, Genective is dedicated to development and commercialization of genetic modification technology for seeds. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. Jim already said, I grew up in China, but I made a career in seeds and crop protection in the United States. So China and the US, both are near and dear to my heart. And I'm so glad this panel is happening at the third US-China Ag Roundtable. I am most excited about our panelists today. So among the panelists, we have the top leaders from all of the global top 5 seeds and crop protection business, and one hugely influential industry organization. I actually know all 3 of them. I have a fond memory about interacting with all of them on the personal and the professional front, but let me do my job as the moderator. We have Dr. Bob Ryder, the EVP of Bayer AG and the head of R&D of Bayer Crop Science. We have Mr. Justin Wolf, president of Global Seeds, Syngenta. Dr. Manujit Basu, VP of Science and Regulatory Policy, CropLife America. Because I know them, I know how busy they are. Both Justin and Manujit traveled to St. Louis just for the event today. Bob is locally based in St. Louis, but I'm sure he can be anywhere in the world for anything else. But they have all chose to be with us here today. Can I ask my audience, which I don't see at all, help me out by giving them a really loud round of applause, because I need to hear that online. Let's get started. What we'll do first, I will give each panelist an opportunity to do uninterrupted presentation. Then I will moderate panel discussion around a few questions. And if in the end we still have time, I'd like to do a Q&A with the audience, but I will check with Jim on the time. Does that work, Jim?
Yes.
He said yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Justin. Good teamwork, just like in the past. By now, we all have heard many times the theme of this year is rise to the challenge about global food security. We also heard many times how important the bilateral U.S.-China relationship is when it comes to agriculture. So I'd like our panelists to share our overview of particularly the seeds and crop protection business or activity for ProfLife, and how they help the world to rise to the challenge of global food security. I also would like you to highlight specific business or activities of your organization that will benefit China, US, as well as to take advantage of the opportunities presented by both countries. I'll
do you
go
want to
by
go
the
first, Linda?
same order. Yeah, then Bob, Justin, manage it, if that's okay.
Okay. I'll take a stab, and then since Bob's a competitor, he can make fun of me afterwards.
All right. Okay.
Anyway, it's great to be here, Linda, and good to see you, and good to see everybody in the audience here. And this is a very important topic. My name is Justin Wolf. I lead the seed business for Syngenta globally. You heard from Eric Furwald, our CEO, earlier, so I won't repeat some of the things he said very well in the video on what we're working on as a company. I think he did a really nice job as an overview. I'll maybe dive into a couple areas he talked about with a little bit more color. I grew up on a farm in Montana, northern Montana. My brother still farms that operation today. It's a fourth-generation farm. It's hard red spring wheat and winter wheat. There's a little over 5,000 acres, and almost all of our wheat it's right by the train tracks and Highway 2 up there in northern Montana. It gets on a train, heads west, goes to Seattle, and out a port to probably a lot of it's been imported in China. And so, though I didn't know it when I grew up, I was already supporting China through food production. And like Linda, though, when I was growing up, I had no desire to want to be on the farm, because my idea of farming was picking rock, picking rye, shoveling the wheat out of the wheat bins, and doing all the labor jobs that you learn as a farm kid. You don't get to do all the fun stuff. You like drive the combine and that kind of stuff. So, I was never thought I would be back in ag, but I actually never left it. So I've been in the industry now almost 30 years. I was 21 years with the company that Bob's with across the street. Great experience with them and great opportunities that they provided. I joined Syngenta in 2018. I live now in Chicago. Our global headquarters for Syngenta is based out of Basel, Switzerland. Our global headquarters for seed is based out of Chicago, Illinois. And as mentioned from Eric earlier, he said we had about 55,000 employees. At last time I checked, I think we were closer to 59. So that tells you how fast we're growing. And when I joined, we were a $13 billion business. And today we're a $33 billion business. So, and I joined in 2018. So it tells you the transformation that the company's been through in a very short period of time. We operate in over 100 countries worldwide. And China is by far our biggest growth market. So if you look at where we invest R&D, North America, of course, is the tip of the spear because it's the biggest agricultural market of the world. We've invested significantly here. We've put about since 2017, about $600 million worth of funding into North America to be able to support North American farmers. A lot of that has been focused in research and development, but we've also been investing in commercial operations and product and supply chain, et cetera. And we have our kind of biotech headquarters for North America is based out of RTP, Research Triangle Park, in that would be our equivalent in a smaller version of the Chesterfield facility here for Bayer. We also are establishing, though, our R&D center and a biotech, very similar type of biotech facility in Beijing. So if you look at how we look at the world, we're a very unique situation because we happen to be a Chinese-owned company, but operate as a multinational. And the unique situation for us is we have pretty equal sales operations almost everywhere around the world. And that's that's different from where I came from, which was heavily of the Americas. We have a pretty equally distributed business between North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and then in Asia. But again, China is really the tip of the spear when it comes to growth for us in the future. And it's about $8 or $9 billion business in China there today. We're probably a $5 billion business in North America. And so both countries are strategic and important to us, and they're very, very much a part of our innovation strategy. And a lot of the things that were said this morning really resonate with me about food security and sustainability. And there were great comments that were, there was a lot of themes that you saw across the speakers from the morning. That's great to see as an industry, because the more we get aligned on those common themes, the more work can get done to make real change. And I think as we look toward the future, we won't solve some of these key issues if we don't figure out how to work together. And so, from a Syngenta perspective, we invest a lot in R&D, but we know as much as we invest, we can't invent everything. So having good relationships with key competitors, competing well in the marketplace, but also figuring out how to collaborate is the right thing to do. And I think, we're coming from an agricultural world in seed and chemistry that has been kind of, kill everybody else, to, I think, a much more, you need to compete. But if you want to solve the world, food problems and really create a sustainable future, there's also a real need to collaborate. And so when we look at our kind of three pillars of our strategy, innovation is really the most important thing, because if you don't have new innovation and drive research and development and new products and new ways of farming and solving those problems, you can't do the other things. And farmer is the second most important thing, because no matter where you're at, everywhere in the world, it needs to be sustainable for them, and it needs to be able to drive their livelihood. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And then the third area has been mentioned a little bit, is really around productivity, and it's how do you do more with less, and how do you do things more efficiently. And so, when we look at our overall pillars of our corporate strategy, those are the three pillars, but they're really anchored around how do you address global food security and climate and sustainability. They're not mutually exclusive. You got to be able to solve for both. And we have some great examples. We'll probably get into this a bit more, but if you look in China, where we've developed what we call modern agricultural practice centers, or modern agricultural centers, if you think about a modern ag retailer in the United States, these would be similar, but probably even more modern. They use drone application and things like that versus other things. But the intent of these is to bring modern practices to Chinese farmers, where their yields are about half on corn of where ours are at. So how do you get them, good seed that's got biotech in it and that's got the best genetics, but also help them, do the right things with fertilizer, crop protection, and seed, and be able to skip generations of learnings that we had in other parts of the world, like North America or Europe or other places, and do it in a way that helps solve also some of the sustainability challenges as we go forward. And we're really proud of the work that we've been doing to help bring modern agriculture also to rural China. So these two markets, if we can't find common ground in agriculture, then I don't think we can find common ground to work together in any other area, right? So I really love the theme of today. I also like the interest to try to continue to find ways being able to bring these two countries closer together. And this nothing's more important than feeding people. I'll stop there.
But yeah, great job, Justin. You just did part of my job. I forgot to mention we have a 5 minutes limit per speaker.
Sorry.
On this section. You are right, Omar.
I'm just trying to not give Bob any time.
Yeah, I'm not there in person, but I'm as diligent as Jim has been in keeping us moving at a steady pace.
Go for it.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, so first of all, I should introduce myself. So I'm Bob Reiter. I'm with Bayer Crop Science, and as mentioned by Linda, I lead R&D. And probably just kind of going off of some of the themes you heard from Justin, because I think we all kind of see the space of agriculture globally pretty similarly. What's always fascinating to me is to think about how the challenge is continuing to evolve, right? And I think for what we see, whether you're in China or whether you're in the US or whether in Europe, the world of agriculture is shifted, and it's shifted from just being productivity focused to being one where sustainability really is going to be part of the equation of how growers decide what to do and how they do it. And ultimately, innovation, I think, has to lead the way in terms of helping to solve for those challenges. And I don't think that part isn't different. What I do see maybe different from a number of years ago is the opportunities have evolved. When I joined this industry well over 30 years ago, we were just at the glimmer of the eye of biotechnology. Today, that's an anchor technology in many parts of the world and continues to expand and evolve. We didn't hear too much concern about crop protection use. Yet today, it's right at the tip of the spear of the debate about how we should be growing our food crops. Climate change, I don't even know that 10 years ago people even knew what the words meant. And all these things affect farmers, it doesn't matter where they're located. And then the last piece I'd shared with you is, and I think Justin alluded to this as well, right? This is not a battle anybody can play on their own or win on their own. I was just looking at the numbers again. The pharmaceutical industry, the private sector of the pharmaceutical industry alone spends $250 billion a year. And we spend in the private sector, I would say probably only about 10 in agriculture. If you pull in the public sector, and China is actually the largest investor in the public sector, I'm going to say we might have another 15 on top of that. So there you go. $25 billion spent to feed the world, and 250 just in the private sector to, alleviate challenges we face from a health perspective. So, I think we have to do a lot with the little we have, and I think that requires us then to, of course, leverage collaboration and investments in startups and partnerships with competitors and other things, because I don't think the problems are solvable otherwise. And I think the beautiful thing of innovation in the agricultural space, of course, is the journey for every farmer in some sense is the same, but in another sense it's completely different. So it's the same toolbox just being applied in different ways. And I think one of the biggest unlocks that we see as an industry and as a business is how to optimize what you get out of every hectare. And I think that is going to come ultimately from, I'm a big, huge believer in the digital journey and the advancement of understanding how to use data from the farm, together with what we can provide with the technologies that companies like ours, like Syngenta's, are trying to provide for farmers. That unlock, I think, is huge, because to me, that's the personalization of medicine, right? That's the customization of agriculture. And that journey will be different for a farmer in China, yet it will be the same, and it'll be a different journey for that farmer in the United States. But we have to be able to pull those things together if we're going to achieve this high productivity and greater sustainability model of ag. So just a few things to think about as we kind of get to the discussion.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you again for having me here. I'm Manojit Basu. I'm the Vice President Science Policy at CropLife America, where we keep our members together on common issues and keep them straight. That's our role as a trade association. And CropLife America was established in 1933, so this is our 90th anniversary this year. CropLife America focuses primarily on crop protection, and as I talk, I may interchange crop protection and pesticides because that's where we focus on. We very strongly collaborate with other CropLifes around the world, CropLife International, there's a CropLife China, CropLife Asia, on multiple issues. And as Linda was mentioning, in her bio, she grew up on a farm, so did I, and we were growing upland rice. And the weeding in upland rice was really bad, so moved away from agriculture. We didn't have the tools, the pesticide product that's available here or in Europe, which farmers around the world absolutely need. So food security is certainly a big passion for me, and again, all three of us have the Monsanto connection here. One of the things that I was passionate about, and even in CropLife America, As Bob was mentioning, in the last few years, the focus has certainly moved away from not just productivity, but also sustainability. And as a trade association, when we are looking into agriculture and what the policy should look like, we are also looking into sustainability. Our key areas as a trade association, we focus on regulatory integrity, where we are looking into the regulatory policies that are coming out from US EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. We work closely with the United States Department of Agriculture, FDA, on food safety issues, the registration of pesticide, the risk assessment, and all those components. But in addition to that, we also work on environmental sustainability. What does it really mean? We need to produce enough food for 9 billion people. That is the statistics coming out of WHO FAO, that by 2050, we will be at 9 billion. So we really need to increase our food production by 25-30% to have an abundant food supply, and that needs to be affordable. How can we get to that point if we have an increasing population, our land resources and other resources are not increasing? We heard this over and over again, producing more with less. Another statistics that came out from FAO on the State of Hunger report, where FAO said until 2014 or 2015, we as the world were doing really great to keep that number low, the number of malnourished people. But since 2015, that number has started increasing, and that number is now at 800, 900 million. It's going to touch more than 1 billion very soon, or maybe the effect of COVID pandemic and what's going on around the world has had an impact where we have more than 1 billion people malnourished. Taking both of them together, we absolutely need to focus more on producing with less resources. And how can we do that? We need all the tools in the toolkit. There are several forms of agriculture, whether it's conventional agriculture, organic agriculture, regenerative agriculture. You will hear a lot of different terminologies. All of them need to work together and complement each other when we are looking at producing enough food for the 9 billion people going forward. So that's where we are looking into what can we do, how can we as CropLife America and CropLife's Trade Association help with regulatory policy. Companies like Bayer, Syngenta are at the forefront of research and innovation. This research and innovation needs to get to the marketplace. Do we have the right sets of policy, risk-based regulatory system? Because several times what happens is the regulatory system intentionally or unintentionally may become a roadblock in bringing these technologies to the marketplace and making sure that farmers have the tool they need. So that's where we come into play, where we are specifically focusing on a risk-based system. Now, it's great, what we have here in the US, a very risk-based system. I know I have USDA colleagues in the room. I don't think EPA is here. We agree to disagree often on the policies, but at least, we have that option where we can have communication with them, and we appreciate the risk-based system. I've seen the same risk-based approach in China as well. That's the system we need to move forward and bring some of these innovative technology to the marketplace. There are countries which go into the hazard-based policy, or governmental policies sometimes can be detrimental. We have seen countries in Southeast Asia where they have moved away from conventional chemical fertilizer, pesticide, and the effect is sudden and drastic. Those kind of policies have major impact, and that's where, again, we come into play, where we are looking at science-based, risk-based policies. Linda, back to you.
Wonderful job, panel. Right on the time mark. So we move along to the moderated question discussion. Actually, I appreciate some of you really shared your little bit of your personal story. So let's bring this back to the U.S.-China backdrop. What was your most memorable work or personal experience in China or about China?
You're gonna start. Picking us by name, Linda. You gotta start calling out our names.
Okay, maybe Justin, we just go the same order. Like as
Okay,
you've been.
I will be much more brief on this one. So before I went on my MBA trip in, I think it was 2008 to China, and one of the things you hear about before you go there is the magnitude of the scale of how they can do things and do things so fast, right? It's one thing to kind of hear about it. It's another thing to see it. And we visited 3 cities when we were there. And when we first landed in Shanghai, I started counting the number of cranes, because you just are blown away by the magnitude. It's not just one project or 2 projects, right? There's just, you lost track eventually of how many cranes there were, but the amount of construction. And then we visited a place where they were planning a whole city and going to build a whole city. It's now being in the seat here, or I'm working directly with China a lot, and when we're constructing things, it's what struck me was just the magnitude and the speed which they can go and get things done. And from 2008, they were cash based in a lot of places. I think they're non-cash based now. When you go there, and it's just amazing to see the speed at which they can innovate.
I can relate to shocking maybe for you. 1996, a student in Shanghai stats that 60% of all the cranes in the world were in Shanghai.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to China 3 times. Unfortunately, each time it's always been to Beijing, which I feel is a little bit, that's like saying you've been to the U.S. and you've only ever gone to New York, right? It's a little bit misleading, but I do reflect on on each of those visits. I've had the opportunity to get out into the countryside, and I think that's for me the amazing contrast still that exists in China is you have this highly modernized city that could be placed anywhere in the world, with a highly educated population, with all of this infrastructure that you just pointed out, and then you get out into the countryside, and agriculture still looks like agriculture that predates when I was born. And the opportunity, that it still represents there, that, as much as China has modernized, that's still one sector that still has tremendous opportunity to modernize. And clearly, the opportunity, the appetite, and I think the value of innovation and technology that could be applied on the farm there it's sitting there waiting and will happen, right?
I can't agree more with you, Bob, on that one. When I came as a student on my first long break, I drive around, learn about the United States, the new country. I concluded the biggest difference between China and the US is actually the difference between urban and the rural area. In the United States, I don't see that much, but growing up in farming in China, I see the huge difference. Yeah. So the difference between rural and urban were the difference. Manojit, how about you?
So my first trip to China was a personal one. My brother-in-law, sister, my brother-in-law was teaching at Fudan University in Shanghai, so had a chance to visit him, and I had to take my 6-year-old nephew, who was very fluent in Chinese and could help me in everything. I was just amazed, as Justin was mentioning, with the advancement and how things were in Shanghai. I also had the opportunity to then visit Beijing and Xi'an province for the Codex committee meetings on food additives, and had an absolute amazing time visiting those places. We hiked some of the mountains when we were in Xi'an, and one of the things that I remember is, so I love to travel and I love to eat. And food is something I want to go try out, and I will go for the absolute local food, buy the street side vendors or whoever is to get the true feeling of what the food is like. And there was this one place we went into, and clearly I didn't know how to read anything on the menu. So I was looking at things, there were pictures, and I see people eating, and I like, that bowl of soup really looks good. So I point it, and they figure it out what I'm asking. I get this bowl of soup. They bring in a little bit. Hot's not an issue. I'm from India. I can take spices. But what they added is this Szechuan peppercorn. And it brought amazing flavor, but what I did not realize is it gives a tingling feeling to your lips and tongue. And I said, yeah, please add some more. And after that, we had to go back to the meeting, and I'm like, how am I going to talk? So again, I have had some really good time every time I've been to China, and I'm just looking forward. Since Codex reopened, we have the pesticide residue meeting in Beijing this June, so I'm looking forward to going back.
Wonderful. The suburban of Xi'an is hometown for me, where I was putting weeds. I ran away to Shanghai to attend Fudan University. Thank you for bringing back wonderful memories there. Wow, so we know people who work in seeds and crop protection knows how to have fun and learn about different countries like China. Coming back to business panelists, actually, both Bob and Justin mentioned innovation, how our industry live or die on innovation. I'm going to have you to our audience to look back and looking forward on the innovation front of our industry. So in your opinion, what are the major technological innovation happening in the past our industry is thriving on? And along with that, has any innovation on business model in our industry enabled us to materialize the commercial benefit of the innovation? So that's part one, looking back. And looking forward, what's the next wave of innovation on the technology side? What would be the one thing you would bet on? As a result, do you also see further evolution on the business model side?
You want me to start?
Go ahead.
I'll
Go
do the
ahead, Bob.
backwards look. You can do the forwards look, and I can add back. I mean, you know, looking back, obviously we've had some tremendous innovation on the farm that, you know, we've seen the investment and realized. We talked about biotech, of course, maybe obviously one of the biggest examples. But you can look at all the pieces, whether it's crop protection, or earlier today I was talking about biologicals and the role that they're probably going to play in the future, et cetera. So I think what's been maybe for me what I look back on and see is the key, though, is getting the acceptance to go beyond the farm. So farmers were ravenous to take on new technology, but we've had some natural limits to that acceptance that goes beyond the farm. And so as we bring new technologies, doesn't matter what part of the world you're bringing them to, we have to deal with that. There's a reason, of course, why China has not yet fully adopted biotechnology on the farm. It's because of factors that go beyond the farm, beyond crop production in China. And so as we have new technologies, we're going to have to think ahead and look and be cognizant of that. I think tied to that, you know, if there's a bit, you know, I think one of the probably one of the biggest, I'll call it an invention, you can call it what you'd like, is the value capture system that we were able to establish in Brazil for soybeans with traits, which was no easy task. But without it, there's no basis to invest. And that, you know, you like it or not, you can see the dilemma we face right now in India with cotton, the dilemma of technology in Argentina, and the risk that could pose in other parts of the world if there isn't an appropriate value capture mechanism in place for investment. I don't care who's making the investment. If there isn't going to be a sufficient return, people are going to put their money elsewhere. And agriculture is no different and no less vulnerable to that. And I think that's something that we, as a society, as an industry, however you want to call it, we have to be clear that innovation takes investment, and investment has to be paid for ultimately, and there has to be a return on that investment in order to have a future for agriculture that is innovation driven. We'll talk probably later about regulation. That's another pet topic of mine, but you got to start first with there has to be an incentive.
Okay, I think good comments, Bob. And you know, when you and I think Bob mentioned the past, I think, pretty well. So if I think about the second question, which is looking forward, and if you take a place like China, and I love Bob's comment on the value capture system in Brazil, you know, when we were purchased, you know, all of our IP assets for our seed businesses reside in either Switzerland or the United States, right? And you know, we want to bring our technology into China. We want to bring it there so they can innovate. And if yields are half of what they are in the United States, you got to have good products that you bring there, along with the modern practices, in order to be able to address, you know, their food security. But in order to be able to do that, we want to make sure, even being Chinese-owned, that our property can be protected as well, and that's really important. And and I'm very pleased with the progress that's been made politically in order to help address that situation, where now they're starting to prosecute stealing and theft and that sort of stuff, because it's important. Because if you're gonna bring your most valuable asset into a country where there's risk, you can't afford that. You can't afford to lose your intellectual property. And so that's progress. If there's a take-home message for the future, because if you look at the next 10, 15 years, they haven't went through a biotech revolution there. They can accelerate that, because what's been done in North America can fit China in a lot of ways. But you got to have also the ability to be able to operate there in a way that makes sense for your investors. And in the end, I think it'll be a great opportunity for the globe, because you'll have you can address food security, but you also address one of the best things you can do to address climate change is continue to improve yields, right, on the same acre or the same hectare. If you're 40% less yield than the United States, you can address food security and climate change all in one fell swoop by just helping Chinese farmers get to the same productivity levels as the United States. So, our future is obviously next generation biotech products, next cropping systems, things like that from an innovation perspective. But also there's some big ticket items that could take current technology and also innovate and skip the lessons that we maybe learned the hard way, Bob, growing up in biotech, right? To maybe do it better on how we bring it into new markets. But that freedom to operate has to be there. Intellectual property has to be there. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
And I touched on this earlier during my overview that we need innovation. That's the only way to move forward to ensure food security for a growing population, and our members are innovating on a daily basis. Sometimes regulations can be a bottleneck to innovation. I'm just talking about from a crop protection pesticide perspective. There is innovation in chemical technology. We hear on slow releasing pesticides which get activated on certain environmental cue. We know about different application mechanisms coming. This year itself, John Deere will be coming out with their see and spray technology, where you're now not applying herbicide throughout this field. You see spotted the tractor trailer with application will take a look. Their cameras, they'll spray the pesticide only when they spot a weed versus the planned real-time application. All these technologies are coming together, and we'll see in the next few years. China is super advanced when it comes to drones, and we see a lot of technology, a lot of regulation, research trials being conducted in China. What does drift look like in drone versus fixed wing? There are a lot of these complexities when we talk about regulation and talk about risk assessment, but not having a proper system to include those enhancements that we see because of innovation in the risk assessment process can sometimes become the bottleneck in bringing these technologies. As both here, Jason and Bob mentioned about the value proposition. How do you make sure that the IP is protected? All that, along with making sure that the technology can remain in place and can benefit the farmer. That's where I think governments and industry need to work together on bringing these technologies out to the farmers.
Thank you. Next topic is actually also mentioned by more than one of you in the presentations about the collaboration. Technology in our industry is expensive to develop. In the GMOC technology field, it's all about stacking up, right? Let's see what we can learn from our rich history of collaboration. Based on your experience, what are the must-haves for a successful collaboration? Not every collaboration is successful, right? What would prevent a collaboration from achieve its desired outcome?
I'd say from my perspective, we collaborate. We are a trade association. We are an advocacy organization, but we collaborate across the aisle. We collaborate with NGOs. We collaborate with academics. I saw Professor Matlock earlier in the room from University of Arkansas that we are working on now. We collaborate with government agencies on specific research projects. I think from my perspective, one of the key success indicator for collaboration is the common goal. As long as you have that common goal and common vision of what you want to achieve and what you are looking forward to, helps in collaboration for it to be successful. That's where we have been able to be successful in some of our outreach activities related to work on challenges we have with the regulatory system and the risk assessment process here in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a couple of points on that. So to the point of the common goal, I think the other part of the common goal is it has to be something greater than what you could have done on your own, right? I think that's the essence of why you want to collaborate, right? And so achieving something that is difficult by yourself for whatever reason. I think the other part is it's a relationship. Collaboration is a relationship. And so trust in that relationship and ensuring that that trust remains at all points of time throughout the collaboration, I think, is also an essential ingredient to having successful collaboration. And an openness that collaboration can be with, and it won't look the same. I mean, the collaboration with Syngenta will not be the same as it's going to be with a startup. But you have to be open that you can have different kinds of collaboration and that anybody can be a collaborator. Because again, back to, we're just not a big enough industry to do it differently than that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, and Bob said it really, really well, and if he has $2 billion in R&D, we have $2 billion in R&D, and he's placing his bets, and we're placing our bets. It's a bit of a dance to get comfortable enough with competitors to be able to show enough what's under the hood, to be able to see, do I have anything to trade or not, right? Or is this not a collaboration? It's more of a transactional relationship. And I think what that does, if you're a bit vulnerable, to where you open up, to where you're more transparent on what's under the hood, then you can see where kind of you're placing your bets. But at the same time, it also allows areas to be able to come together and focus. So, and I think that's going to be essential as you go forward, because we can't event everything ourselves. There's not enough investment to make it happen, and it's not just between companies. The collaboration, we have hundreds of collaborations, and anything from companies to universities, right? And I think the public and private sectors, there's an opportunity to get closer than we have been in the past. I think where there's been maybe more, industry dealing with industry stuff, but these things I think are going to intersect more in the future. But any collaboration has to have a basis of trust. Otherwise, there's no foundation.
Excellent. In our audience today, we have a government representative from both China and the U.S. We also have general public audience from both countries. If there's one thing you can ask to the government, to the general public, to create that positive surroundings on for our industry, because we know the business is very complex, we need all kinds of support. What would be the one thing you would ask towards the government? What would be the one thing you ask towards the general public?
I'll go first on the government piece. One of the things that I see operating now in global business is, the tendencies are going to more closure and not openness, and I think that's because there's a lot of geopolitical things going on. People are worried about their own security and food security in their own right and that kind of thing. But the reality is, if we want to get to solving the world food problems and doing it in a sustainable way, we need more openness, not closed, not a closed approach. So if I would ask the one thing for the government would be, let more freedom to operate and allow the flow of things. R&D, for example, research and development and sharing technology into and out of China. We're ready to do it, ready to help, but it's got to be able to flow in. It's got to be able to flow out, right? It can't be a one-way ticket. From a consumer point of view, I would say tell us what you need to help that you feel more comfortable with technology. Because as Bob mentioned earlier, some of the things that we can advance from a science perspective, if we don't have consumers willing to adopt and take, that can also slow things down. And so we need to figure out how to communicate and collaborate and be more trusted by the public as an industry as well.
Maybe extending on the wish list theme, so an element of what Justin described is, I would wish for a uniform, scientifically driven, consistent policy on how products are regulated, right? Particularly crop protection. That's just a killer, right? It's a killer that different geographies are using different approaches, and that, candidly, some parts of the world are using it in a way that, for political reasons or even reasons that they think are maybe the right policy because of whether it's about climate change or some other basis, but that is so stifling to innovation, and in a sector that's so critical. It's one of those challenges that I wish we could do something differently about, but it doesn't feel like it's gotten any easier, and that's a little bit unfortunate. I think to your point on the acceptance piece, I think we have to recognize is agriculture is no different than any other sector that we're living in, which is data and transparency will continue to grow. So, like it or not, it won't be long before everything that's happening on the farm will be evident and available and transparent. And how that will influence consumer choice and behavior, and how that will influence farm decisions, I think is still, for many of us, not fully clear. But it will happen. And this will be the new twist to what does acceptance really mean, right? And I think that's not something I think farming in different parts of the world are really quite ready for. Honestly, I don't think any of us are quite ready for understanding what it means and how it will play out. But I'm pretty confident it's going to happen. So, that's one I think that we have to grapple with as we think about our food production globally.
So I'll start from the consumer point of view, and it's great that we have plenty of choices today, and whichever form of agriculture you take, whether food's produced through organic, regenerative, or conventional agriculture, they're all safe to consume. There is no one better food than other. We have to realize it as a consumer. We have to adapt to the new technologies that are coming out, and the robust risk assessment that is being done by the regulatory agencies. They are the true experts sitting there reviewing tons and tons of data before making a decision on a specific crop protection tool. So a little bit of communication for sure from our part, but also a willingness to understand and learn and not get carried away with there are always different narratives. Some may fit one, some may not fit. So evaluating information, studying, finding out, trying to dig deeper rather than just going by the headlines. Sometimes, the headlines don't reveal the entire truth. So that's from the consumer angle. From a government angle, as Bob just mentioned, more consistent regulatory mechanism around the world certainly helps. A risk-based regulatory system is what we always advocate for. There is hazard in almost everything. You stand out in the sun and there are UV rays which can give you cancer. But that's a hazard-based approach. There is a risk-based approach that, you put a sunscreen, you do other things. How can we have a risk-based regulatory system globally? It's great that we have that kind of system in both US and China. There is also, especially from a US and China perspective, an opportunity for mutual agreement on data, mutual acceptance of data. We do see that data generated in one country is not accepted in another, and tests are required to be carried out in the country again. That adds to enormous cost and delays the regulatory process. If the data has been generated by GLP certified lab, by established laboratories, then those data should be accepted for regulatory decision-making across boundaries.
Also, trust in institutions like regulatory agencies, right, has eroded, and that's also a kind adding complexity to the problem.
Linda, this has been a great panel. Mojit, Bob, Justin, thank you. Linda, I had a text message from our friend Amos Smith wanting to know if you're celebrating with the balloons in the background a birthday or some milestone at Genective.
Oh, that was the second grand opening.
Oh, good. There you go, Amos.
Funded
Good. All right. Well, thank
headquartered
you.
in Champaign, Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you for a great
Yeah,
panel.
it's not my
Appreciate your time.
birthday.
Thank you.